No big intro today. I've had around 36 hours or so to get my head around what happened with the Morgan Gibbs-White situation. Some of you will have seen my live stream as soon as it happened and the news broke. Others, maybe not. At that point, I think I mostly felt like a bit of shock and as well as definitely some embarrassment. But as the 36 hours have passed, I think I've begun to feel more and more angry about it. So what I thought I'd do is just get my feelings off my chest. I don't know if it's because it's Monday morning or what. And then the plan is after this video to never talk about this again. Certainly not until some time has gone by, the dust has settled, and I can maybe look back on it with a little less lividness. Maybe a bit how I now see the Willian situation back in the day when we had Willian from Shakhtar Donetsk in the building at the training ground doing his medical, and then Chelsea came and stole him from us. Honestly, it feels a bit like that. This Morgan Gibbs-White debacle. For those of you who didn't see my live stream, I talked about it quite a lot. You know, I was doing videos about this signing for 2 weeks. That's how excited I was. And that's how excited I think a lot of the Spurs fan base were. Because we knew he was exactly the kind of player we needed, exactly the kind of creative genius, actually, I think, to really challenge James Maddison and Decky Kulusevski, and most importantly, be there when they were injured, which has happened far too often. And that is why when the news broke on Saturday night that he was staying at Nottingham Forest, that he'd signed an extension to his deal. And this is an important thing to say, by the way. It is just an extension to his deal. I'll say this, look, I did a TikTok video saying I was wrong about Gibbs-White because I was so sure he was going to come to Spurs and allowing Forest fans to abuse me. So now I've done that. I feel like I am able to also push back against some of the Nottingham Forest fans' glee at this. They're all talking about what a big new contract it is for Morgan Gibbs-White. It's just an extension. He's got 2 years left on his deal and he signed 1 year extra. So he's got 3 and he's now going to be on about 200 grand a week. You know, it's very much a money grab for him and his agent. And there is some argument to suggest that maybe they knew that that was a possibility and they used Spurs. But I don't know. I don't feel like it is that. I actually feel deep down that Morgan Gibbs-White did want to join Tottenham Hotspur. And, you know, I'm sure you've all seen the video where him and Mad Marinakis, the chairman, are kind of announcing it to the Nottingham Forest social team. It is the craziest video I've ever seen. I can't think of a single situation in the entirety of certainly not elite Premier League football where the chairman has been stood next to the player as he talks about how happy he is to have signed a new contract whilst referencing him as Mr. Marinakis in this instance. A lot of people talking online about how it was a hostage video. It does have that vibe to it. But anyway, my point of this video isn't really to be angry about or angry at Morgan Gibbs-White or even angry at Nottingham Forest. You know, good for them. They have their moment. But I'm angry at Tottenham. And I'll start this by saying, you know, I'm very often one of the few, I feel, in the Tottenham Hotspur community to not completely go in on Daniel Levy. I've always said it. I'll stick to it. I'm not Enoch in or Enoch out or Levy in or Levy out. I'm always just a little bit, I see myself as kind of glass half full about Spurs. And I just think the thing is with Levy and Enoch, unless we know exactly who's going to come in and take over, we cannot be sure that it's going to be a better option. That's how I've always felt about it. And I actually think Marinakis is a perfect example of it. Now, tell me, would you guys, as Spurs fans, want Marinakis to be your chairman? Now, sure, a lot of Nottingham Forest fans are like, oh, he sticks up for the club. He's so passionate, you know, and they love the fact that he charges onto the field and admonishes his manager. And they love the fact that he's standing next to Morgan Gibbs-White, almost like what feels like holding a gun to his head as he, you know, signs a new deal. But for me, that's not what I want my chairman to do. That's not who I want him to be. And, you know, that is an example of the kind of chairman that Tottenham could end up getting if Daniel Levy left. And sure, you know, let me know in the comments. You might say that's who I would want. That's the kind of person I would want, but not for me. But the reason I'm telling you that, you know, I often stick up for Levy and Enoch where I think it's due is because today I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I feel angry at the club. And I'm going to add in Vinay Venkatesham because he's now the CEO, so he's got to take some responsibility. I'm going to add in Johan Lange. And in general, I'm just going to talk about Spurs in terms of recruitment, in terms of this not being the first time this kind of thing has happened to Spurs. And I just want to say this doesn't happen to other clubs. It doesn't. And maybe some of you will say, oh, well, Chelsea triggered Michael Elise's transfer minimum, his minimum fee release clause, when he was at Crystal Palace, and he went on to sign a new deal. Fine. Maybe release clause get triggered sometimes. But what doesn't happen is it all becoming such a huge, embarrassing drama. It never comes with the memes for other clubs, with the embarrassment, with us now being accused of bottling a release clause. That just doesn't happen to other clubs, and it certainly doesn't happen to properly run big clubs. And Tottenham are talked about as being in the big six, right? The top six, notionally. Of course, we finished 17th last year, so it's a bit embarrassing to suggest we're in the big six at the moment, although we did win the Europa League and win the Champions League. So there's an argument for it. But it doesn't happen to the other elite clubs. Nobody accuses them of bottling transfer deals or release clauses. And it's because of the way we do deals. And this is something that I will go in on Daniel Levy about. Like I said, I try and protect him at times, but the way that he attempts to do deals with other clubs make them hate him. And this is yet another example of Daniel Levy and the club trying to get a deal done on the cheap, basically. Yes, it's not Tottenham's fault that either Morgan Gibbs-White himself or his agent leaked the release clause. And some reports that the release clause was leaked to all top six clubs because Morgan Gibbs-White wanted to play at a higher level, right? That's not Tottenham's fault. But what is Tottenham's fault is to then not just go in and go, bang, here's the 60 million release clause, and we'll pay it all up front. I kind of thought that's what will have happened. I thought Vinay Venkatesham will have showed Daniel Levy, this is what you need to do to move on, to change, to show that Tottenham are a different club when it comes to negotiating. And the reality is, Daniel Levy didn't do that. John Percy in The Telegraph did an article last night, which basically, it has the headline that alludes to the fact that here are the real reasons that Tottenham didn't get Morgan Gibbs-White, and says we didn't pay the release clause. We didn't trigger the release clause properly. It doesn't actually say that in the article. It suggests that must have been what happened. But what I will say is, if a release clause is properly triggered and you just go in there, bang, 60 million straight up front, that's what it says on the contract. Like Man City did with Jack Grealish, where they paid 100 million straight up front. So Villa didn't even have a chance. They didn't have a chance to say anything. But Daniel Levy, once again, I'm afraid, showing that his negotiation tactics are the reasons why other clubs hate us. And now you can add Mad Marinakis and Nottingham Forest fans to that list, because he clearly went in there and tried to pay it off in a substandard way over a number of years. I don't know. It's just speculation, isn't it? But maybe he tried to throw a player in there or something. And of course, if you're Nottingham Forest at that point, you're like, I'm not dealing with these. I'm not dealing with these people. I think they can just kind of bully us around, push us around because they've been in the Premier League longer than us, because they've been in the Champions League and we haven't. They got to a Champions League final. No, Daniel Levy, we need you to start acting like a big club. And I thought Vinay, having come from Arsenal, dare I say it, who I'm afraid have more experience of being at the top of the league for longer than we have, despite that run during Pochettino's years, I thought Vinay would have changed it a bit, and it hasn't. And it's yet another example of Daniel Levy and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club doing something that optically makes the club look like a laughingstock. It's just yet another one. And off the top of my head, sacking Martin Jol at half-time, threatening to move us to Stratford, the European Super League, forcing the staff to furlough during COVID, sacking Ange Postecoglou after winning the Europa League. And now this. Yet again, the memes are out. Yet again, the fans from other clubs just laughing at us. And we just won the Europa League. So we had the chance to change things around and to stop this from happening. And that kind of 24 hours when we signed Mohamed Kudus off one of our biggest rivals, and it looked like we were getting Gibbs-White through the door, that the reason Tottenham fans were so happy, and the reason why people have been watching my videos so much for the last 2 weeks, is because we thought there was some movement. We thought there was some change. We thought this talk of boardroom upheaval and Vinay coming in was leading to genuine change in the football club. And then bang, straight away, after 2 weeks of, I guess, haggling and trying to be patient and thinking they'd triggered the release clause, but clearly not having done it properly or allowing some wiggle room for Marinakis to go in there and intimidate Morgan Gibbs-White into signing a new deal, frankly. And that's Nottingham Forest and Morgan Gibbs-White's problem. That's not our problem. But the problem is it makes us look bad. And it's why all other clubs' fans hate us. We talk about it a lot. We don't understand why so many fans of other clubs who aren't even London clubs a lot of the time hate us. It's because of this weirdness that we bring to negotiations, that we bring to almost everything when it comes to being under the stewardship of Daniel Levy. Chelsea and Arsenal buy and sell players to each other all the time, yet neither will sell to us. And West Ham wouldn't normally sell to us, but they needed the money this year, so they have. But it had been what? Since Scott Parker, 2011, was it, that we last bought off West Ham? And it's all because it seeps down from the boardroom. In the boardrooms, chairmen probably talk amongst each other, or maybe not the boardrooms, but in the bars, in the corporate elements of stadiums, when the chairmen are there, they probably talk about each other and said, "Oh, you haven't had to deal with Daniel Levy, have you?" And I'll give you a perfect example. Simon Jordan, the former chairman of Crystal Palace, talked about it on TalkSport recently. He said, yeah, he's actually mates with Daniel Levy. He says, away from football business, he's a lovely guy. He's just an incredibly tough businessman to negotiate. And Simon Jordan was almost laughing. But he was like, when he's trying to buy a player off you, he sends you bids every 10 minutes, incrementally raising his offer by 50 grand. And we're talking about with negotiations of millions and millions of pounds. And how quickly, if you were a chairman of a football club or a CEO of a football club, how quickly would you get bored of that? Meanwhile, you're dealing with, when Abramovich was there, you're dealing with Marina, whatever her name was, at Chelsea, or you're dealing with the Saudis at Newcastle, and they come in and they go, yeah, we'll just give you the money. What do you want? Okay, will you take $1 million less? Yes. Okay, great. Let's just do the deal. Whereas Levy just time and time again trying to negotiate. Can I get the best deal for my club? And I've stuck up for him a lot over the years. I'm sure I will again at different times, but today I'm angry about it. And like I said, it seeps down from the boardroom. So it's just like Spurs, other chairmen and other people at other clubs will think that Spurs have this weird kind of mix of a sense of entitlement, but never with the financial willingness to back it up, to back that entitlement up, to just go and slap down money on the table and go, we want your player. We know he's got a release clause. Here's the money up front. That's how you have to act in this day and age. Think of the clubs we're fighting against to get players now. Think about it. Liverpool potentially about to spend another £150 million on Isak, having spent over £100 million on Wirtz, having bought in Ekatike, having bought in Kirkes, right? And they just go, we're a big club. We're going to put the money down on the table. And the player comes, and it doesn't take that long. Arsenal just signed Gyökeres. They signed Marino recently. They've signed Zubamendi. They've signed 6 players, having come second in the league this summer. Tottenham have signed Takai for a South Korean record fee of £5 million. And Mohamed Kudus from a club who we know needed the money to reinvest because Graham Potter wants to change his squad around completely. We need more. We need it now. And what we need is Vinay Venkatesham. He knew the situation when he came in. He must have said to Daniel Levy, I'm going to take over the football side of things and I'm going to change it. But the problem is that Daniel Levy will then always be the person in charge of the offering of the bids. He'll never allow that to change. He says, he said, starting with Scott Munn, I'm going to, we've done an investigation into the club and the mistakes that have been made, and I'm going to hand over the reins of the football side of the business. And now, he got rid of Scott Munn and he's handed it over to Vinay Venkatesham. But what he actually has to do is hand it over completely, including the negotiations of contracts and bids. And he has to get out of those because the reality is, like I said, those chairmen, they hate dealing with him. Sir Alex Ferguson talked about it after the Berbatov transfer from Tottenham to Manchester United. He said it was more painful than my hip replacement. Now, because everything seeps down from the top of clubs, all these clubs in the boardroom hate dealing with Spurs, and now we've added Nottingham Forest fans to the list of fans who hate Spurs, and they are laughing at us today. And Nottingham Forest fans, they all get in my comments. They're like, we're a big club because we've won 2 European Cups. And it's like, yeah, historically you're a big club because of Brian Clough. Brian Clough, one of the greatest managers in the history of English football, went to Nottingham Forest, won 2 European Cups, and then Nottingham Forest before that and after that have never done anything. And because of this Morgan Gibbs-White situation, we've now allowed Forest to come in and say, you're just a tiny club, and here's another example of it. And it's rubbish. Spurs have been a bigger club than Forest since I was, 12 or 13. Forest were big before that. They were better than Spurs up to kind of, and including the 1991 Cup final when we beat them. But we've just given them a chance to rub our noses in the dirt, and I hate it. And I just think, would this have happened if Chelsea had tried to buy Morgan Gibbs-White? No, it just wouldn't, because Chelsea wouldn't allow it to happen. They wouldn't have done under Abramovich, and they wouldn't do now under Todd Bowley and Clearlake. Newcastle just bought Anthony Elanga off Nottingham Forest. They didn't upset Marinakis. They just went in, backed up their interest, and said, "What do you want?" And they said, "Well, we think he's worth £55 million. Here's £55 million." And that is the difference between the Saudis, who've only been in the Premier League a couple of years, and Spurs under Daniel Levy. And you might say, "Oh, but they've got unlimited funds." Sure, but they also have to adhere to PSR, so that it's in their interest to try and get as good a deal as possible as well. But they also know that when dealing with people in business and in life, be polite. Don't undermine them. Don't patronize them. That's what it will feel like to other boards, that they're being patronized by Daniel Levy because he thinks he knows more. And I actually did some videos on TikTok saying Daniel Levy won't allow himself to be beaten in this situation with Marinakis. He's got the experience. He's dealt with this stuff loads. My God, was I wrong? My God, was I wrong? Levy's had his pants pulled down by Marinakis. And sure, I don't doubt that Marinakis has used some pretty strong arm tactics to do it. And Morgan Gibbs-White probably felt like he didn't have any choices in the end. Marinakis flying out to wherever it was, Cyprus, where they're playing a friendly, or Portugal, I think it was, sorry. And just basically strong-arming into it, so much so that he has to do a video next to him calling him Mr. Marinakis in a kind of Sopranos-esque manner. But got the deal done. And just to kind of end this rant, all of this is like one of the main reasons why I've come to the point where I am tempted. I'm tempted to kind of say, actually, it would be good if we got bought by an oil state. I'm tempted to say it. I'm not there yet, because I just feel like I do like how the club's run sustainably. I think we're doing it properly. We've stuck to the rules. Levy and Enoch have had the Northumberland development project for like 20 years, which is the stadium development and then the hotels development and the flats development, all designed to make Spurs sustainable for many, many, many decades and hopefully hundreds of years to come. And I like that. But the reality of this is, if we got bought by an oil state, we'd actually be more respected in the boardrooms. Abu Dhabi are, and the chairman of Man City, Sheikh Mansour, respected in the boardrooms. The Saudis of Newcastle respected in the boardrooms. Daniel Levy, not. They're looked upon as like an amateur outfit, trying to nick £10,000 here and £10,000 there. And look, I did videos about it and talk about how shady Mad Marinakis of Nottingham Forest is. But Daniel Levy's shady in a different way, in like a less obvious way. But it's probably just as irritating, maybe even more. And weirdly, just considering how I do actually think he has the best interest of Tottenham at heart. But the way that he goes about these things is not helpful to Tottenham as a club. It just really isn't. So, that's how I feel about it. That's the end of the rant. I will tell you kind of, for any of you who weren't across it on Saturday night and yesterday, I will go through a little bit of the details of what ended up happening with Morgan Gibbs-White in a second, and then go on to the rest of the Tottenham transfer news. But do let me know how you feel about it all in the comments. Let's talk about it today. We'll get it off our chest today, and then we will move on. And by God, do Tottenham Hotspur need to move on. There's so much pressure on Daniel Levy and Vinay Venkatesham and Johan Lange now to excite the fans again, because we got that excitement. We wanted Morgan Gibbs-White. We thought it was going to happen, and now we're in the mud. We're in the mud, and we're having our heads pushed down in the mud by Forest fans, by Arsenal fans, by every fan. Talking about it being classic Spurs and the word that I refuse to use, the S word. But before I go on to the rest of this transfer news, guys, please, thank you so much for watching. Please do give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube. Do press that subscribe button and the bell notification button so you know when my daily content drops. During the summer transfer window, daily on weekdays, Tottenham transfer content, as well as all the news and views from White Hart Lane. And if you like my my content, guys, there's a link in the description box below where you can nominate me for an award at the Football Content Awards. I've written in the description box a couple of the categories that you can nominate me in. If you would be able to do that, it would be really helpful. They're really great awards, and I'd love to be there on the night. All right, let's get into the Tottenham transfer news and just some factual stuff about that Morgan Gibbs-White situation rather than what my opinions were, which I kind of ranted on about in the first 10 minutes. Like I said, according to Percy in the Telegraph, he said that Morgan Gibbs-White's release clause was complex and Spurs fell short, in his opinion, of meeting a number of conditions needed to activate it. Forest have signed Gibbs-White, as I said, up to a contract until 2028. He was understood, according to The Sun, to have been so impressed by Marinakis' enthusiasm and vision for Forest's future that he agreed not to pursue a transfer to Tottenham. I mean, take that as you will, but maybe it was more like, you know, I'll give you between 200 and 250 grand a week, and you'll keep your mouth shut. And, you know, I'll throw in a house and a barbecue and a sunbed. And also, you know, I won't get my people onto you. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's just sour grapes. But this is what Marinakis said. He said, Morgan is a special player, not just in terms of talent, but character and mentality. He represents what we want this football club to be. He's a winner, talented, ambitious, fearless, and proud. There was significant interest from various clubs, but we were determined to build our future with Morgan at the heart of it. I promised our fans we would not only compete, but grow stronger and stronger every season. Today is another big step up in that journey. I mean, Tottenham should not have allowed it to get to that stage. They just shouldn't. When they saw that there was a problem right at the start, once we so-called triggered the release clause, and that Marinakis had any legal leg to stand on to not just allow Gibbs-White to go and speak to Spurs and sign the deal, then that is when Vinay should have stepped in and said to Daniel Levy, look, we've got trouble here. We just got to lay it on the table, lay the money out straight up. And I don't know, maybe he did that, maybe he didn't, but Levy didn't accept it. After signing his new deal, in the video, the hostage video, Gibbs-White said this: I felt at home at Forest from the moment I arrived. The support from the fans, my teammates, and everyone around the club has been unbelievable. I believe in what we're building here. Sure you do, mate. You were desperate to leave. And with the backing of Mr. Marinakis and the enormous ambition he has, I want to be part of making something special. I'm excited for what's to come. Well, look, my personal opinion is he signed a one-year extension to his deal, meaning that next summer he will be again at his most potent in terms of the value that Forest could get for him at that point. Apparently, there's no release clause in his new contract. Maybe there is, but it wouldn't be under 100 million, and it wouldn't surprise me, unfortunately, if he went to Man City next summer, probably for about 100 million quid if he has a good season this season. Okay, that's the end of the Gibbs-White stuff. Let's try and look forward. And like I said, Daniel Levy, Vinay Venkatesham under a lot of pressure, and they need to bring in some players who are going to excite the club. And apparently, according to some reports last night, Tottenham have made contact over the potential signing of Manchester United midfielder Kobbie Mayu. Thomas Frank and the North London club love his versatility and have made an informal inquiry about a potential move to see how difficult it would be. I love Kobbie Mayu. Very exciting young player. Fits with Tottenham's transfer strategy. Manchester United have been rumoured to be willing to let him go for a while now because it would represent pure profit for them in PSR terms, in terms of they would then be able to invest that profit straight back into buying players for the club rather than amortization and it being kind of pushed down the line as it is with players who you've bought in from elsewhere rather than academy graduates. I wonder with Garnacho and Mayu whether there's an element of Ruben Amorim feeling like they've got a little bit big for their boots considering, you know, how young they are. And that's why Garnacho is certainly available this summer and lots of reports that Mayu is as well. I'll tell you this, a lot of the people who know a lot about Manchester United think he is absolutely outstanding. If you haven't heard Rio Ferdinand talk about Kobbie Mayu, he thinks that Amorim should be building a team around him. So if Tottenham could find a way to get him in, he could potentially play as that kind of number 6. He could play in the 8, and he has played under Amorim in the 10 role as well. He's someone that I think would bring the fans together. But in reality, when was the last time Tottenham bought a player off Manchester United? I mean, never. Fraser Campbell as part of that Berbatov move. And again, considering what I spoke about earlier in terms of the boardrooms and chairman not wanting to deal with chairman, I know that Sir Jim Radcliffe does kind of laud Daniel Levy in terms of he's talked about Tottenham being the club that he aspires Manchester United to be in the boardroom, which I find quite ironic. But will they want to sell Kobbie Mainoo to Tottenham Hotspur, a club who are swimming in the same waters at Man United? I don't know. Maybe. What would we have to pay? 65 million, 70 million pounds, maybe? It might be worth it. He's young. He would grow. He'd have sell-on value. And then finally, would Kobbie Mainoo really want to come and join Spurs? Ian's a Manchester boy, academy graduate. There are some pictures of him, weirdly, in a Spurs shirt, the old Hewlett-Packard pony shirt. I don't know if he used to be a fan somehow. Would he want to join us? Look, who knows? But it is one that would excite. And like I said, Tottenham need to be doing something to get the fans back on board. A lot of the reports are suggesting that we're now making inquiries about Liverpool's Harvey Elliot, with Liverpool talking to various clubs, most of whom are kind of below Spurs in the transfer, waters that we swim in, the likes of Fulham, West Ham, etc. I've looked a bit more into Harvey Elliot since the unmentionable happened at the weekend. He is an impressive player. He's only 22 years old. He actually joined Liverpool like 6 seasons ago. I could not believe how long ago it was. 5 or 6 seasons. He was a very young, exciting talent from an incredibly tender age. Like 16 was when he made, I think maybe even 15, made his Premier League debut, and at the time was the youngest player to play in the Premier League. He obviously hasn't had loads of minutes at Liverpool, but he's grown up under Jurgen Klopp and now Arne Slot, and he has scored important goals and made important assists for them. So I don't think it would be as disappointing a signing as a lot of Spurs fans are saying, Harvey Elliott, but would he walk straight into that first team at Spurs? I'm not sure. He would put pressure on the likes of James Maddison, and he's versatile, so he could play across the forward line. I wish he was. One of the things I really liked about MGW is a big physical guy, and I know Thomas Frank will want that physicality, whereas Elliot is a bit more diminutive. So for me, that is a bit of an issue. But if that deal now happened at a decent price, I wouldn't be as gutted as maybe I thought about it last week when there were reports and I thought we were going to get in who from Mad Marinakis' Nottingham Forest. Strange report came out last night that Lille are negotiating with Tottenham to sign our reserve goalkeeper Antonin Kinsky on loan. For me, that would be, if Tottenham let him go on loan, that would be absolute madness. Presumably that would mean what? We have Brandon Austin on the bench this season? No. Not for me. And bad timing as well, because Brandon Austin made a boo-boo in the goal for one of the goals against Wycombe Wanderers in the friendly at the weekend. Kinsky, for me, and I've talked about it a lot, ace distributor of the ball, exciting, young, talented goalkeeper, potentially the future of Tottenham Hotspur in goal, I think, long term. And Thomas Frank needs a good distributor. I want someone to come out of Spurs or Ali Gold to hear that this is an absolutely bogus link, because for me, it would make no sense whatsoever. And Kinsky, I think, can pressurize Vicario to be number one this season as early as that. So I'm really hoping there's nothing in that. Fabrizio Romano came out this weekend, said Spurs do have genuine interest in João Paulinho from Bayern Munich, and an initial approach has been made with his camp. He says, Romano, that more will follow in the next weeks, as yet there's no formal proposal to Bayern. Spurs want a loan. His wages are high. Of course, Bayern will still have some money to pay off for the Harry Kane deal, so that's something that could play into it, although a lot of that was paid off with the Matthias Tell signing. More reports coming in this weekend about the Sonny to LAFC potential. Spurs are considering a £15 million offer, but are prepared to lower their asking price, which was around 35 million pounds for Son, down to 20 million pounds if he were to ask specifically to join LAFC. So Tottenham are willing to kind of grease the wheels for Sonny to do whatever it is that he wants to do in terms of clubs to join. But for me, I don't want to rule out yet, especially as he's on the flight to the Asian tour at the moment. Let's not rule out him staying for his last year at the club. Some reports suggesting Spurs close to making an official move for Parma defender Giovanni Leone. Spurs are apparently currently leading the race for the talented 18-year-old centre-back, with Parma willing to listen to offers between 30 and 40 million euros. Well, how many centre-backs do we need? Secondly, I think we're only going to be looking at buying more centre-backs if Christian Romero leaves. Romero is on that flight to Asia for the tour. He will be there. He looks committed. He's playing well in the friendlies as far as I'm concerned. And it doesn't look to me like Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid or anyone else are going to pay the money it would take to get Christian Romero out of the club. So for me, links to players like Giovanni Leone, as talented as he is, the Parma player, they are more like Spurs getting their ducks in a row in case Romero ends up leaving towards the end of the window, or in a year's time when Romero will only have 1 year left at the club. But at the moment, we're pretty well stocked. Vuskovic is looking unbelievable in the friendlies. Danso is playing well. Like I said, Romero is playing well, and Van de Ven is fit and firing. And in the weekend friendly, he got a fair few sprints in as well, which is really good to see without him getting injured. So at the moment as well, with Dragoshin to come back and Ben Davis can play as an auxiliary centre-half, I don't think we need to buy another one in as yet. Obviously, we've got Alfie Dorrington out on loan at Aberdeen as well. So I don't think we need to worry too much about that at the moment. Another weird report last night, which underwhelmed me completely. Tottenham and Man United apparently keeping tabs on and keen potentially to bring Alexander Mitrovic back to the Premier League. He's 30 years old now. He scored 28 goals and racked up 7 assists last season. Yeah, but where? For who? Saudi or something. Spurs apparently see the Serbian as an alternative to Dominic Solanke. For me, no. For me, it's a no, not Mitrovic. I would rather us buy a young, exciting centre-forward talent who can learn off Dominic Solanke than bring in an old-timer like Mitrovic, who also, for me, has always had a bit of a personality issue. A bit of a, he feels like he's the best player on any pitch, and he just isn't. If we could get a player in akin to the Fernando Llorente deal we did back in 2018, 2019, someone happy to sit on the bench who came on and did some damage and was kind of towards the end of his career, maybe. But Mitrovic is not that man as far as I'm concerned. Reports over the weekend from Ali Gold that Thomas Frank was set to decide whether Mikey Moore could head out on a loan this season. Well, that has been confirmed that Mikey Moore can go on loan this season. I'm a bit gutted about it, to be honest, although I've also been underwhelmed with Mikey Moore's form since he came back from his illness last season. And in the 2 preseason friendlies he's played so far this season, he hasn't been involved in getting on the ball nearly enough. And it was confirmed that he is not on the plane to the Asian tour because he is able and allowed by the club to seek out a loan deal. For me, it's a bit disappointing, but if he can get, let's say, bottom half of the Premier League minutes or Championship minutes in his legs, grow a bit physically and start to properly believe in himself again. Don't forget, he's only 17, 18 years old. He's a kid and he is a future player, proper future talent for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. So a loan could do him well. I did think he might stay with Thomas Frank this season, but there you go. Keeping on the loan front, Spurs apparently have received several loan offers for Luka Vuskovic in the last days. Many clubs from La Liga, Bundesliga and Serie A are showing an interest, but it is believed, thank God, that Thomas Frank wants him to be part of his squad for the current season, and rightly so. He has been a standout player in those preseason games. Be interesting to see if he gets any minutes against the old enemy on Thursday, which is the kickoff is 12:30 on Thursday afternoon. But he looks ready to me. He's 18 years old, but he's built like he looks about 28. And he just makes great decisions. Lovely player, and obviously really threatening from attacking set pieces too. The players on the plane for the Asian tour are as follows: George Abbott, Brandon Austin, Rodrigo Bentancur, Lucas Bergvall, Yves Bissouma, Janai Byfield, Kevin Danso, Ben Davis, Jamie Donnelly, Archie Gray, Luca Gunter, Brennan Johnson, Antonin Kinsky, Mohamed Kudus, Will Lancashire, James Maddison, Wilson Odobert, Pedro Porro, Richarlison, Romero, Pat Matassar, Dominic Solanke, Sonny, Jed Spence, Matthias Tell, Mickey van der Ven, Guillermo Vicario, Luka Vuskovic, and Yang Min Hyuk. In terms of kind of news from that, really that not many youth players, kind of academy players, are on that list. George Abbott, Janai Byfield, Jamie Donnelly, but he's obviously had senior minutes out on loan. Luca Gunter, Lancashire I see really as a proper member of the first team squad now, but apart from that, not many. Yang is on the tour. I guess you'd expect that in terms of the kind of financial aspect of it. It'd be interesting to see whether he goes out on loan. It was reported with that list late last night from Spurs that Destiny Udogie, Kota Takai and Mano Solomon have remained at home for treatment. Let's hope that especially Destiny Udogie's injury is not too bad. Obviously, that's alongside Dragusin, Kulusevski and Brian Hill, who have more long-term injuries. And this is the statement they released in terms of loan deals. Mikey Moore, Alfie Devine and Dane Scarlett have been granted permission not to travel in order to explore potential opportunities for loan moves. Dane Scarlett has had a lot of loans now, and clearly Thomas Frank sees he's not ready. I wonder if it'll ever happen to him. But of course, I mean, happen to him in terms of being a Spurs regular. But of course, I would have said the same back in the day about Harry Kane before he had a late burst. He was a late developer. So let's hope the same for Scarlett. Alfie Devine had a chance at number 10 in that first preseason friendly against Reading, and he took up some brilliant positions on the pitch in the pockets, but he never really did enough with the ball and lost it too many times. And like I said, Mikey Moore Slightly disappointing, but I will be following. Wherever he goes on loan, I'll be following him. I wonder if he might get a loan over to the Bundesliga, although what they prefer to do is buy players young and put on kind of a big sell-on clause. Not many players get loans over there, young English players. All right, just a couple of bits of tiny new other news. George Abbott has signed a new long-term contract with the club. He played really well in that Wickham friendly in the 6 at the weekend. Looks like a good player. He's on the tour to Asia and obviously had a good loan last season with Notts County. And then just a little quote from Matthias Tell's interview. He was asked about whether he spoke to Harry Kane about joining Tottenham. He said, yes, I spoke to him beforehand. He told me, if you need anything, send me a text, give me a call. He's a top guy. And you wouldn't expect any different from Sir Harry of Kane, would you? All right, this has been a bit of a longer Monday morning episode because of my rant, but thank you so much for watching. Do give this video a like. Please do press subscribe and the bell button to get notified of all of my content. And let's hope for some positivity on the transfer front as we head into that North London derby on Thursday lunchtime. Come on, you Spurs.